Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a shorter version of the podcast that you might be used to. This is a 15-minute Friday where myself and a returning guest from a past podcast sit down and talk about a specific subject that we are passionate about in hopes to give you some, hopefully, good advice, hopefully thought-provoking opinion about it, maybe sending you into your weekend or whenever you're listening to this to send you off with some, invigorating, energizing thoughts or advice to maybe try something a little bit different, or hopefully just having learned something in general. And the guest that is returning for this 15-minute Friday is Stefan Brandow. Stefan, once again, welcome back to the show.
Of course. Love it. How you doing, bud?
I appreciate you every single time that you're down to do these. We have a lot of fun talking.
We do.
And I like that you want to keep talking, honestly.
I do.
And you're not like, listen, dude, that whole 15-minute Friday thing you do, you got me for like almost 2 hours on my normal episode.
Luckily, it's all subjects that I'm into and we can riff on. So
yes,
we're good
which
to
I
go.
know you are one of the perfect fits for this. So, speaking of subject, you want to let the listeners or viewers at home let them know what we're talking about in this episode.
You and I are going to get specific because this is something we both have experience with. We're going to talk about how to start a brand, specifically clothing brand.
Yes, we are going to. Of course, the thing is with this, there's going to be any of this advice can be put into
used for about anything.
Starting a brand in general. But for sure with this, a lot of the examples at least are going to come from the world of streetwear, clothing, apparel.
Where you and I
have
have had our experience.
Yes. And we've talked so much about this as well that I figured, you know what? Let's put it in podcast form and let somebody else in on the conversation who might be trying to do their own thing. So whether you're trying to start your own clothing brand, trying to start your own brand in general, I feel like this is an episode that you'll get something from. I hope, at least if we do a good job at sharing some advice and opinions. So, Stefan, without any further ado or any more time wasted, you ready for me to start the clock?
Let's go.
All right, timer begins now on our 15 minutes, and I'm going to toss it to you to kick us off.
I think a lot of people that I know want to start brands, and something that I had experience with growing up when I wanted to start is nobody gave me any advice. Everything was tried to kept so secretive because it's like, well, if I give this person advice on how to start this brand, they're going to take away sales from my brand. And I think that is so silly and it's so demeaning to that person that may be excited about doing something. You may not know. They may be doing something in the same space as you, but promoting to a completely different audience. So I think there's a lot of people that I get a lot of questions because me doing the freelance design work that I do, having experience with owning my own brands, I get a lot of questions, and I feel like when people come to me and ask those questions, it's like they're asking for a secret.
Yeah.
It's like, hey man, I don't know, but do you know where I can get some of this? Or, hey, how do I do this? And I think it surprises people a lot of the times, and I'm like, hey, to do this, and this. And they're like, well, why would you give that away? And it's like, I'm not worried or afraid about what somebody else is going to do and how it's going to affect me. I did not get that advice or help when I was trying to do something, and I wish I had. So I want to give that to other people.
Yes, 100%, which honestly is the point in this podcast a lot of the times, is to share that advice, share those thoughts, share those secrets, quote unquote, that a lot of people in a lot of different industries like to keep close to themselves, which, is whatever. I guess if you go through something and you scratch and claw your way to get some information, you don't exactly want to easily give it up. But honestly, why not? And not to trail off too much from the actual subject, but even on that thought process, like ever since I heard this explained somewhere, and I don't really remember where, but the idea of not wanting to share information with somebody in fear that they're going to steal something from you or they're going to, do the same thing as you, honestly, is kind of a backwards thought. Because if I could sit here with J.J. Abrams or Jordan Peele, and they could tell me all the steps to making a perfect movie and becoming an awesome director, that doesn't mean that I can take that information and become an awesome director.
And also, if you and I both hear that same information, it doesn't mean that either of us are going to make the same movie.
Exactly, 100%. So as we dig into how somebody can start a brand, we're going to try and share a lot of that information or those thoughts that for some reason people do hold close to themselves and keep as secrets when realistically, just share the information, because what somebody does with that information is totally on them, and it doesn't mean that they're going to do the exact same thing. So what is maybe the main question or series of questions that you get when someone comes to you and says, Stefan, how do I start a brand?
I think with me specifically and doing what I do and what you have dealt with is a lot of it is clothing. So I may be getting specifically into clothing to help people, but realize that it can kind of backtrack if you want to start a candle brand, if you want to do anything. It can kind of involve everything. So a lot of what I hear and deal with is people just don't know the information of what to do. So I have a lot of people that come to me and say, hey, I want to print t-shirts. What do I do? Super broad spectrum on that. There's so many options, but I think the biggest thing is to have an idea, a name, and a vision, and finding a designer that can help you with that. That is going to be the most important thing, because in this day and age, doing anything, branding and design work, in my opinion, is so important to set you apart from the crowd. Because as hard as it may be for people to find information about starting a brand, starting a business, starting a clothing company specifically, it's also the day and age where there is more information out there, so more people are doing it. So something important is setting yourself apart. So at least with clothing companies, what I tell people, I'm like, think of the name. If you have your name, your idea, truly do the work. Do the work of searching Instagram, seeing if anybody else has that name, searching the internet, seeing if it's been used before. If it's used in a different space, but you're going to be doing different things, figure out how you can maybe work around that, separating yourself from that. If you're doing a men's outdoor outerwear brand, if your name is similar to a women's fitness yoga pant company, you might have a little leeway in using that name. So do your due diligence. Really search the internet. If you're thinking about doing this seriously, really get into looking into trademarks, copyrights. It's not as hard or as expensive as people think. If you're not as serious about it, you truly can't even just go to LegalZoom and just sign up and have your name protected. Something from my experience, I wish that I had done that. My first brand, I had to stop doing the way I was doing it because a water bottle company thought that they owned the name for apparel. They did not, but for what I would have had to dealt with legally, it was less of an effort to change the name and rebrand than it would have been to fight for that name, even though it was mine.
Yeah.
So don't deal with that situation. Do your due diligence. Do your due diligence. That is a tongue twister.
That really, yeah.
Wow.
I'm not going to attempt to say that.
I'm not going to do it again. Do that and really look into the legal aspects of it. So once you have, your name, you're ready, your idea, look around to different designers. You can find freelance designers in your area. If you don't know of somebody, I have gotten so many jobs for myself of people saying on Facebook, hey, does anybody know of a graphic designer that can do this? Do that. You are going to be surprised how many friends know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that will tag somebody. Message that person, say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Different designers are going to have different rates depending on what you do, what you want. And like I said, with me being in the clothing space, it's always different. There's different ways you can go about it. Once you have a designer and you've kind of explained to them your ideas, what you want to get, you have your things ready. For clothing specifically, the next biggest step is finding a printer, a screen printer. This is going to be dependent upon what you are looking to do. If you are looking to do high minimums, which could be 50 to 100 to 200 of a specific shirt design, look for a local screen printer. If you're looking to do 10 of something, 2 smalls, 2 mediums, 2 larges. If you're looking to do something like that, small, get started, there's options out there like Printful.com that are direct to garment printing that they do great work. It's cheap and it's less of a risk. I do that with my own brand. I've printed shirts that I want to make, that I love, that I'm not sure if people are going to love. I'll take the chance on making 10 because that way I have one, if a couple sell, whatever. If that sells out, then I know, hey, great, this shirt did well. Maybe I'll do 25, 50. And that's when you have to kind of really look into the information of, well, if I do it through Printful again, it's going to be the same quality that I've gotten. What's the pricing look like? If I go to a local screen printer, how much are they going to cost? It's a lot of asking and talking to people. It's not as easy as clicking and getting a design, clicking and having your shirt printed. You're going to have to look around.
Yeah.
It's what's going to be the most effective for your business. I have screwed myself over many times going through a certain printer for whatever reason when I could have gone to a different one and gotten a different price break, a different, something different, and I could have made a bigger profit. So it's really, once again, doing the due diligence. Nailed it. Yes.
Boom.
Of checking and seeing what is out there and what is available.
Right.
So once again, if you want to do a candle brand, that's going back to checking the candle manufacturers. Is it easier to go to one and get a bunch made? Is it easier to buy the supplies and do it yourself? Don't think that there is only one way to do this and do your brand. Coming from a DIY background of like punk and hardcore, I've seen bands spray paint and print their own things without having no knowledge of how to do it, because that's what they had the money to do. That's the price that they were able to use to do. That's not saying that you can't do that too. If you don't have the money to do something, figure out a way to do it.
Right. When I think even in that specific case of like, let's say like a punk band, like spray painting their own merch with like a stencil or whatever it is, chances are that's going to feed into their marketing and branding anyway of who they are.
And that's the next biggest aspect is once you have your product, marketing and branding are just as important design-wise as the actual design of the product, especially in this day and age when social media is everything when it comes to marketing, and especially in 2020 and going forward, where in-person marketing might not be as important. You're not going to see as many people out and about. You're not going to be able to go to pop-up shops, flea markets, things like that with the way the world is now. So where social was important before, it's even more important now. Something that I highly suggest all brands looking into is Facebook ads. You would be surprised how little you would spend on a Facebook ad for your product and what you get back for it. I know a brand in California, every single cent that they made out of 2 lines of their clothing, they put every single cent back into Facebook marketing only. The next line, they quadrupled sales. That is the best example that I can give somebody of saying, hey, this does work. And this backtracks to a previous episode we did. If it doesn't work at first, you got to keep trying. You got to figure it out. You're not going to sell out of your first line of something. If you do, amazing, good for you. If you don't, figure out how to work around that. What communities and different avenues can you promote in that you might not think would like your product that in the end could like your product?
Yes.
There's a lot that can be done with social. As we say how important it is, there's different avenues and different ways to use it. Do you want to be the brand that only posts product shots on their page? Do you want to be the brand that is a lifestyle brand that you have no product shots and it's people, influencers, whoever wearing your stuff and that's how you promote? Do you not want to do any of it and you want to do something completely random that's super unique? Figure it out and do that. Social is going to be your biggest way to promote your brand.
And one thing that I feel like, it's like one word that I feel like we are right on the edge of saying when it goes from figuring out the purpose in your brand, the design, finding a designer, finding the people to help build your team, finding the way you want to promote it, is maybe 2 words: clarity or alignment. I feel like those are kind of the 2 things that honestly sum all of this together. These are the core piece that I feel like all of this webs out off of and branches out off of is clarity in what you want the brand to be, or finding clarity with the people that may be involved in your brand, whether it's your customers or other team members who are helping you, and figuring out what that alignment is. Because you need to figure out what your brand voice is. And I'm not even just talking in like your quote unquote copy that goes into your captions on an Instagram photo. I'm talking about like, back when you were saying earlier, like when you're looking for a designer and you're figuring out like who's the best fit for this, you got to find that alignment with them.
And that could go from what you can afford to what that person is willing to do, to maybe you find a designer to do your logo, but then you find a different designer to do your marketing, you find a different designer to do your products. You really have to research these things and really get deep in the nitty gritty if you want to make this work. If you're lucky enough to be a designer, like both of us were, for me, it was the technical things. It was, okay, finding a screen printer, figuring out pricing, figuring out the social. I had the things that I knew that I was good at, the things that I figured that I could do, I learned. Things that I couldn't do, like photography, I hired somebody.
100%. Like it's the exact same thing. So when I had my clothing line years ago, like I went through a series of different printers, and I didn't, I wasn't as smart enough at that point in time to know that what I was looking for was the right alignment and a partnership. But by default, that's kind of what I was unknowingly doing, because I remember trying like a local person in the town that I lived in at that point in time. And I was like, oh, it's local. That's dope. It'll be easy to go pick up. It'll be easy to communicate with them. That's so sick. We're supporting, it's local, supporting local. But what ended up happening is nothing too negative, but I could tell that their alignment or belief in what I wanted this brand to be wasn't there in the quality that they were giving me. So what we wanted to deliver in quality didn't align. You know what I mean? There wasn't an actual clarity there, where they were kind of treating it as just another job, and hey, this local kid wants us to like press some stuff onto a shirt, even though that's not what he asked for. You know what I mean? It was just kind of this like misalignment in a way, where I was looking at it from like, hey, this will be simple and it's within my budget. And did it get the job done at the time? Sure.
And you may have to go through things like that until you figure out exactly what you want to do.
But as long as you're continuing to look and research and figure out
trial and error.
Yes, like what really works for me and gives me the quality out of this that I want to produce for other people. Same thing with like photo and video. Josh Emmerich, a friend that we both have, and a guy who helps produce this podcast, like he was like the second photographer that I had ever worked with. And at that point in time, me getting photos of people, me and like my girlfriend at the time wearing the shirts, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. You know what I mean? But those people, and even the first person I worked with, they wanted to work with the brand, not just because it was like, hey bro, let me take some pictures. It was, hey, I believe in what you're doing and I want to figure out how I can help. And as a matter of fact, like when I went in a transition period in my clothing line between changing the names because I wanted to rebrand, Josh helped me form my very first video commercial. And that was just when we were working together, not as like business partners, creative partners, anything. He was a customer of mine that saw the quality that I was putting into my brand.
And the longer you do something like this, you'll find new relationships like that.
Yes, the clarity was there, the alignment was there on what we were both trying to produce. So he bought my apparel first, and he saw the way that I packaged it and saw the way that, I would do the whole like write a custom thank you letter and toss in some stickers and all that sort of stuff. He saw the care in quote unquote customer service that I was giving, and he liked the shirts and the idea of the brand enough to then reach out and be like, how can we work together? I want to help you produce some visual content because I can see that maybe I could help you do that. I could see that being the next step that maybe you need. How can we work together? Now, yes, that's maybe a little bit of a specific story or case, but really all it was because I was sure about how I was branding, the type of customer care that I wanted to give, the type of shirts that I wanted to get it printed on, and that's getting really specific, but that was literally one of the things that when we first met up, Josh was like, dude, this is the softest shirt I've ever owned. And the design and the idea behind the design and the story that you're building for this brand, I support all that. So how can I be a part of it?
And as we're talking about this with clothing, like we were saying, this could go to anything.
Yes.
If you really have a vision for your brand and you find a designer that can, or you are a designer and you communicate that correctly, people are going to come your way that either feel the same way or they're into what you're doing, and those open up relationships. I can't tell you the amount of times that, like you said, I've met photographers, I've met bands that I've sponsored with clothing companies, that because I was doing things the way that I was doing them, it brought in more of the people that I wanted to be around, and it builds that customer base. It builds the communities that you want to try and get into.
It's figuring out what kind of culture you want your brand to have. So we've passed our 15 minutes, but I want you to talk a little bit more on how to navigate social media and figure out how you can promote or build the culture that you want your brand to have.
So I think a big difference, like you were saying, is realizing what you want to do with your brand. And like I was mentioning earlier with social media, you could be a brand that posts nothing but product shots, or you could be a brand that posts nothing but lifestyle shots, a little bit of in between. It's looking into other brands that you like and respect, seeing what they do. Why do you like them? What sparks that fire when you say, oh, I love this brand? Figure that out. Look to other brands and see what they're doing, how they're being successful, and pull that into yours. Take a little bit from everything. I like how this brand takes their photos, but I like how this brand markets their stuff. I like this brand's website. There's no reason you can't pull all of those things and kind of create what you are doing.
Exactly. That goes back to it's the steal like an artist mentality. And there was like a book that is literally called How to Steal Like an Artist.
Yes.
It's exactly what it explains. It's like, well, that's how you steal like an artist.
There's a reason that sets a fire under you. There's a reason you love that.
Yeah.
Figure that out and then figure out how to put that into your own brand.
Yes. Like look at, the 5 things that you feel like closest, will closest compare to what it is you're wanting to create, and then figure out one thing from each of those and take that, put it into your thing, effectively creating your own unique thing, but it's based off of all the aspects that you like about something else, whether it's creative, whether it's business, whether it's marketing, promotion, anything like that. So I love that idea of that's how you steal like an artist. You can be inspired by things, and it doesn't mean that you're making the exact same thing that is.
There's a reason you like it. And
Right.
if there's a reason you like it, then there's a reason that you might want to do that for your brand. And I've said this before and other things we've done. I've learned a lot too from seeing what not to do. If you don't like that a brand that you follow in your feed is constantly like, hey, this is on sale for this much. Hey, this is on sale for this much. This, like the hard sell. The hard sell is just posting, this is for sale, this is how much it is. There's brands that can get away with that. There's brands that can do that. There's brands that are only on Amazon that they exist off people just buying their stuff and, not doing any promotion. If you see brands that are doing that, make sure that you don't do that if you don't like it. If you don't like that somebody's constantly trying to sell you something, don't do that with your brand. If you like that your favorite brand tells a story, that something hits you inside when you see it and you're like, oh, that's so cool that they do that. Figure out what they're doing and why they're doing it the way that they're doing that, and pull it back to your brand. If them telling their story is what sparks you and makes you want to buy that product, then that's what you should be doing for your product.
Yes, 100%. So my last question, somebody's listening right now, they're wanting to start their own brand and they just want everything balled up into one big piece of advice. What are you telling somebody right now who is like, man, I want to start this brand. What would you say that I should do? How can I get started? What are you telling them?
From my experience, what I feel is the best thing to do is finding the correct designer for you if you are not designing yourself. That is what's going to set your brand apart. That's how you're going to get all of your things done. That is what is going to make people look at your brand and go, ooh, I like that. So if you don't have any design sense, if you know what you want, or even if you don't know what you want and you don't have a vision, really look around and talk to different designers. Start getting into design forums. Start following the designers that other designers are following. Message them. You may find out that the designer you think you can't afford is the perfect designer for you. You're not going to know if you don't check, because that visual representation, that first look, that first impression that somebody gets of your brand, it's called a first impression because it only happens once. So if you find the correct designer to represent you and your story and your product, that's going to set everything off the right way.
And I want to add to that, and I want to say my perspective on that would be, know your purpose in starting your brand and understand what sort of story it is you want to tell. Are you, if you take your first step into building a brand and having that clarity in what your purpose is to do it, is it to be super artsy and moody and tell these authentic, crazy, deep stories? Or is it to be as flashy as humanly possible and try and, compete with Nike or something, and even digging in further of understanding what your brand is. What is your brand past the name and the logo? What is your brand past the, design that you print on a shirt or get it on a hat or a bag? Or what is your brand past, oh, cool, I got the physical candle made, to use the candle comparison. It's like, what is your brand and what is its purpose? I feel like that would be my biggest piece of advice, is know the story that you want to tell. Because then when you get into social and marketing, you've got your basis, you've got your foundation, and you're like, okay, I've got this set. Now I've got the product, but now I know how to show people the product past just making a post on Instagram.
An example that I love to use is skateboarding companies that make physical skateboards. It is all the same piece of wood in the same shape, slightly different sizes. Why do you want to buy the same thing from this brand as opposed to this brand? Why are they speaking to you differently than this one? So bring that back to your product. If you're making candles, why does that candle company speak to you, but this one doesn't?
Yep, exactly. So we for sure passed our 15 minutes. This is the longest one that I've had you on for. And honestly, like, maybe we should do like a part 2, part 3.
This
like,
one could go deep.
I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we honestly didn't even dig into. Maybe I might have to have you back on for some more 15-minute Fridays in general, but for sure ones that are like, how to start a brand part 2, part 3, because there's a lot we could uncover here. Maybe it just needs to be its own podcast episode itself.
Ooh.
Just full, like, hour long.
There's a lot you can get into.
There's a lot of stuff, but I thank you for sharing what you just did in this particular episode. Anybody listening or watching, hope you got something from it. If you got any questions about, hey, dig into this further, you guys cut it off at 25 minutes, I needed more. Stefan, if they want to talk to you, if they want to hit you up directly, like many people have in the past, and say, hey, I need some guidance, I need some opinion or some connections or whatever it is, how can I start my own brand? I think you're the guy to ask. Where can they find you on social media to do so?
Please feel free to DM me on any questions with any of this. It's at Stefan Brandow. It's just my name. You can find me anywhere with that. I love to talk about this. Obviously we do. If anybody needs help, this is the stuff that I love, that I'm passionate about. So if you've got questions, you want to riff on this, please feel free to message me.
Now, what if they're going to take the idea of how to steal like an artist and they want to reference your clothing brand to maybe see what you've done, to see the examples of all the stuff that you just talked about on this episode? Where can they find that?
My clothing brand is Outward, and you can find it at OutwardCo.
Boom. There it is. If you want to chat with me, I'm at Who's Ross Tyson. I do not have a clothing line anymore, but I've been there and done that, so I can share some thoughts about it. But what I do have is a podcast, and you can follow that around the internet at WYDH Pod. Stefan, once again, thank you so much for sitting down with me to make an episode of that podcast.
Always a pleasure. Let's do more.
Appreciate it.